Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Matt kidnaps Nikki for revenge on Victor? The Young and the Restless, YNR spoilers hint that Matt Clark aka Mitch Bacall, Roger Howarth, may kidnap Nikki Newman, Melody Thomas Scott, for revenge on Victor Newman, Eric Braden. Will Matt decide to make Victor pay by putting his wife in grave danger? In the December 4th episode, Victor released the AI program in the Shadow Room system and went after all Matt's assets. It was originally a plan to make Matt give up Noah Newman's, Lucas Adams, location, but Victor unleashed the program anyway when he realized Noah had scored his freedom. As Matt sped off into the night, he angrily declared this wasn't over. That lines up with YNR spoilers, which indicate Matt will ultimately make his way to Genoa City and cause total chaos for the Newman family. Of course, Matt will want to get back at Noah, Nick Newman, Joshua Morrow, and Sharon Newman, Sharon Case, but Victor won't escape Matt's wrath either. In fact, Victor might have just put himself at the top of the revenge list by causing Matt's financial ruin. Matt may disappear for a bit and resurface in GC ready for a fierce fight. It may not be long until Matt takes action against Victor and the whole Newman clan now that his life as Mitch has blown up. Victor will have to face consequences for that AI program move, so how will Matt make him suffer? Since Victor loves Nikki more than just about anything in the world, Matt may think targeting her will be a great start. Matt has also proven that kidnapping is one of his favorite revenge tactics, so Nikki may get snatched next. Perhaps Matt will hold Nikki hostage and demand Victor's entire fortune in exchange for her, or something along those lines. Whatever the case, Nikki could land in a dangerous situation once Matt returns to town, so stick with us for updates on all the horrifying news to come. The Young and the Restless spoilers say Matt will prove he's a force to be reckoned with, but Victor is even more powerful and may turn the tables all over again. Nikki Newman's disappearance begins like a whisper in the night, a subtle shift in the air that no one notices at first, but within hours it becomes the kind of calamity that shakes Genoa City to its core. A crisis that seems to unravel every Newman secret, every simmering conflict, and every buried fear all at once, because when Nikki vanishes without a trace, it isn't just a missing person case. It's the beginning of a collapse that threatens to destroy the entire Newman empire from the inside out, starting with Victor himself, who has always been the titan of strength, resilience, and dominance, but now, standing in the quiet of the ranch living room, staring at the overturned glass of sparkling water Nikki left behind and the coat she didn't take with her, something in him breaks. He realizes that this time, the danger isn't a business rival, a hostile takeover, or even one of his many enemies resurfacing from the shadows. This time the danger is silence, the unknown, the horrifying possibility that Nikki didn't leave voluntarily, that she didn't run, that someone took her, and in the hours that follow, the Newman family erupts into chaos, accusations flying, alliances forming and breaking, guilt spreading like wildfire, and fear becoming the dominant force in every room of the ranch, because with Nikki gone, the foundation of the family weakens and every dark truth they've tried to hide threatens to spill out. Victoria is the first to lose her composure, pacing, shaking, demanding answers, desperate to maintain control of Newman Enterprises while simultaneously battling the rising panic that her mother's disappearance is connected to something she should have seen coming. Something she ignored while buried in corporate warfare, and her guilt becomes unbearable as she replays every conversation she had with Nikki over the last week, noticing things she missed. The tremor in Nikki's voice, the flashes of fear in her eyes, the moments where she reached for her glass a little too quickly, hiding the trembling in her hands, signs of stress Victoria pushed aside because she assumed, hoped, or maybe just needed to believe that her mother was stable, that she wasn't slipping, that she wasn't being targeted. But now those signs haunt her as she tries to hold herself together while directing security teams across the city. Meanwhile, Nick spirals in his own way, quiet and intense, refusing to say out loud the thought that keeps clawing at him. That this all started with Jordan, that the ghosts of the past they thought they buried have returned seeking revenge, seeking blood, and the idea that Nikki might be suffering somewhere because of something they failed to prevent gnaws at him until he snaps at anyone who tries to reassure him, insisting he can feel something is wrong, that he knows Nikki didn't just walk away, and while Nick tries to keep his emotions buried under the surface, Adam, always the wild card, reacts in a way none of them expect. Becoming unusually focused, strategic, and protective, stepping into the chaos with a determination that shocks the rest of the family, because Adam knows darkness better than anyone, knows the patterns of abduction, manipulation, psychological torture, and he begins to piece together clues others overlook, starting with the security footage that somehow malfunctioned at the exact moment Nikki went missing. A coincidence Adam doesn't believe for a second, and as he digs deeper, he uncovers traces of tampering, small digital footprints left behind, evidence of someone sophisticated, someone calculated, someone who planned this with precision, and that realization becomes the catalyst for an even deeper panic, because if someone planned this, then it wasn't random, it wasn't opportunistic, it was personal, and if it was personal, the Newman family has an endless list of enemies capable of something like this. Even Abby gets pulled into the storm, torn between managing her own guilt over being distant from the family and her rising terror that her stepmother may never come home, and she tries to comfort Victor only to find him unresponsive, swallowed whole by fury and fear, his mind racing with old rivals, past betrayals, and unresolved vendettas, each one a possible lead, each one a possible threat, and yet none of them seem quite right. Meanwhile, the ranch becomes a command center filled with investigators, security experts, and Newman bodyguards scouring every inch of the property for clues while Victor retreats to his study, surrounded by photos of Nikki, his trembling hands clutching one picture in particular, an old candid snapshot from years ago when Nikki was smiling, carefree, happy, and the weight of not knowing whether she's alive crushes him in a way no hostile takeover or business collapse ever could. But the true shock comes when the first clue is discovered, a small silver bracelet Nikki never took off, found near the stables, broken as if ripped off during a struggle, and that single object ignites a terrifying new theory. Nikki didn't disappear on her own, she was taken, dragged, or forced into a vehicle that left no tire tracks, no footprints, no sign of its direction, almost as if the person responsible was trained, meticulous, and frighteningly efficient. And as the realization settles over the family like a suffocating blanket, paranoia sets in, and everyone begins suspecting everyone else. Was it Jordan? Was it Claire's biological father resurfacing? Was it Ashlyn's associates? Was it someone from Victor's past returning for revenge? Or someone entirely new, someone watching them, studying their weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? And the fear intensifies when the first anonymous message arrives at Newman Enterprises, not as a ransom demand, not as a threat, but as a cryptic note that reads, "You have taken so much. Now something has been taken from you." And the lack of instructions, lack of demands, lack of signatures sends the family into a deeper panic because whoever did this doesn't want money, doesn't want power, doesn't want leverage. They want the Newmans to suffer, they want them to crumble, and the idea of psychological warfare terrifies Victor more than any financial attack ever could. At the same time, the media gets wind of Nikki's disappearance, and Newman Enterprise stock begins to plummet. Investors panicking, board members demanding answers, competitors circling like vultures, and Victoria finds herself torn between the agony of her missing mother and the crashing corporation she must somehow save. But the more she fights to hold the company together, the more she feels it slipping through her fingers, and her frustration explodes in a boardroom meeting where she finally snaps, admitting that they cannot continue business as usual while Nikki's life hangs in the balance. Meanwhile, Adam's investigation uncovers something even more disturbing. Traces of a hidden burner device used to jam the ranch's security system temporarily, a device he recognizes from previous encounters with criminal networks, and that discovery leads him to a terrifying theory, that whoever took Nikki likely had access to inside information, knowledge of the ranch layout, knowledge of the security blind spots, knowledge of Nikki's routines, and that realization fractures the family even further as suspicion shifts inward, toward the people closest to them, the employees they trust, the acquaintances they've allowed too close. Then, just when the tension reaches its breaking point, Victor receives a private package delivered directly to the ranch, a package containing one item. A small vial of alcohol with Nikki's fingerprint smudged on the glass, a cruel message implying that the person behind this knows her struggle, knows her vulnerability, and intends to use her greatest weakness against her. And that horrific revelation shatters Victor completely as he imagines someone forcing Nikki to drink, tormenting her, breaking her, destroying her sobriety piece by piece, and the thought of Nikki suffering alone somewhere, frightened, ashamed, and powerless sends Victor into a rage so intense that even his closest allies fear what he might do next. And as the days stretch on with no sign of Nikki, The Newman family begins to unravel, tensions exploding into arguments, alliances crumbling, old resentments resurfacing, and through it all, the terrifying truth becomes clear. The Newmans are on the brink of collapse, not because their finances are at risk, not because their rivals are circling, but because the heart of their family is gone, stolen, and without Nikki, they realize just how fragile their empire truly is, how much she held them together, how much she was the quiet force balancing Victor's intensity, calming Victoria's ambition, grounding Nick's impulsiveness, and reminding Adam that he was still part of this family, even when he didn't want to be. And as the search intensifies, as the clues grow darker, as the threat becomes clearer, one thing becomes certain: Nikki's disappearance is not just a mystery, not just a kidnapping, not just another Genoa City scandal. It is the first domino in a chain reaction designed to destroy the Newman legacy forever, and unless the family can set aside their differences, unite, and uncover the truth before it's too late, the empire Victor spent decades building may fall apart piece by piece until there is nothing left but ashes, regret, and the memory of the woman who held them all together. And somewhere out there in the shadows, Nikki, terrified, weakened, desperate, waits for someone to save her while the clock ticks dangerously, mercilessly toward a fate that grows darker with every second that passes, leaving Genoa City wondering whether this time the Newmans have finally encountered an enemy they cannot outsmart, cannot overpower, and cannot defeat, because this time the battlefield is emotional, psychological, deeply personal, and the cost of failure is not a company, not a reputation, but the life of Nikki Newman herself. And if she is not found soon, the consequences will tear the Newman dynasty apart in ways they never imagined, revealing secrets they never meant to expose, and opening wounds they may never heal. The crisis spiraling around Nikki Newman's disappearance intensifies with every passing hour, transforming from a family emergency into a full-scale psychological war that shakes the core of the Newman dynasty. And as the days drag on with no trace of her, Newman Ranch becomes a battlefield of fear, suspicion, and unraveling sanity, each family member fighting their own demons while trying to hold on to the hope that Nikki is alive somewhere, waiting, suffering, clinging to the belief that her loved ones will find her before it's too late. But with every minute that hope begins to crack, especially as new clues surface, clues that don't lead to answers, but instead paint a horrifying picture of someone taunting the Newmans, someone who has been watching them, studying them, learning their weaknesses, and while Victor channels every ounce of rage and desperation into tracking down whoever orchestrated this nightmare, the rest of the family begins breaking apart one by one, starting with Victoria, who becomes consumed by a guilt so heavy it follows her everywhere, whispering reminders that she was too busy fighting corporate battles to notice her mother's cries for help, too obsessed with power plays to see the warning signs, too blinded by ambition to sense the fear Nikki was hiding. And that guilt comes to a boiling point late one night when Victoria, exhausted and shaking, collapses on the floor of her office, clutching one of Nikki's scarves left behind from a previous visit, inhaling the lingering scent as tears finally break free, because for all her strength, for all her dominance in boardrooms, for all her stubborn determination to always appear in control, Victoria feels like a helpless child again now, devastated by the possibility that her mother might be lost forever. Meanwhile, Nick becomes increasingly reckless, ignoring Victor's orders, ignoring security protocols, ignoring warnings from Chance and the police, driving through dangerous areas alone, interrogating criminals, confronting anyone with even a whisper of a connection to the Newman family. And while his courage is admirable, his desperation is frightening, because Nick has never handled emotional devastation well. He internalizes it, lets it fester, and eventually it explodes, and the explosion comes during a confrontation at society, where Nick publicly lashes out at Adam, accusing him of knowing more than he's revealed, accusing him of having some hidden agenda, accusing him of exploiting the chaos for his own benefit. But Adam, surprisingly, doesn't retaliate. Instead, he stands quietly, letting Nick vent, letting him break, because Adam understands that the fear consuming Nick is the same fear crushing him, and for once, he refuses to escalate the situation, choosing instead to walk away, because deep down Adam knows something Victor doesn't. The patterns behind Nikki's disappearance match a level of planning and psychological manipulation he's seen before, and it terrifies him in ways he refuses to admit. As for Abby, she tries to serve as the emotional bridge between her siblings, offering support, food, comfort, and presence, but even she begins to unravel, especially after finding an unnerving message left in her restaurant office, a note that reads, "Even the ones on the sidelines will fall." And that message sends chills through her as she wonders whether Nikki's disappearance is just the beginning. Whether each member of the Newman family is now a target, whether someone is plotting to dismantle the dynasty piece by piece, leaving nothing but devastation behind. And while the Newman children crumble emotionally, Victor transforms into something darker than even his worst enemies have seen before. He becomes quiet, cold, methodical, and as the hours pass, his determination sharpens into a near-inhuman intensity, and he calls in favors from dangerous people, activates old contacts in underground networks, unleashes an army of private investigators, cybersecurity experts, and mercenaries, forming a shadow task force dedicated not just to finding Nikki, but to hunting down whoever took her. And Victor's threats become so chilling that even those closest to him grow afraid of what he might do when he finds the culprit. However, the situation worsens when a disturbing video arrives at Newman Ranch, grainy, distorted, barely visible, but unmistakably showing Nikki in a dark, damp room, crying, shaking, struggling to stay balanced. As she sits in a metal chair, her hands tied, her face pale, her body trembling, and at one point she looks directly into the camera, whispering something the poor quality makes impossible to decipher, and that image. Nikki, terrified, weakened, broken, destroys Victor, destroys Nick, destroys Victoria, and even shatters Adam, because this is no longer a question of whether Nikki disappeared voluntarily or was taken. This is now a nightmare proving she is suffering, and whoever has her is determined to crush her spirit piece by piece. But what terrifies them even more is the end of the video, where the camera zooms in on a small table beside Nikki with a single glass bottle on it. Alcohol, untouched, almost mocking, and that cruel detail sends shockwaves through the family because it proves the tormentor knows Nikki's weaknesses intimately, and intends to torture her mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually by dangling her addiction in front of her as a weapon. After the video arrives, Victor's rage reaches volcanic heights, and he vows that when he finds the person responsible, there will be no mercy, no negotiation, no forgiveness, and the intensity in his voice forces even Adam and Nick to step back, realizing Victor is dangerously close to unleashing a side of himself even they aren't prepared for. But while Victor goes into overdrive, Claire becomes a surprising emotional anchor in the chaos, offering comfort to Victoria, supporting Nick, encouraging Abby, and trying to piece together clues using her unique background and psychological insight, especially since she recognizes certain patterns in the tormentor's behavior. Patterns mirroring the methods Jordan used, but more calculated, less chaotic, more controlled, suggesting someone with long-term planning skills, someone not acting out of passion but precision. And Claire begins to wonder whether Nikki's tormentor has been operating in Genoa City for months unnoticed, weaving themselves into the environment, preparing for this moment. Meanwhile, the police investigation grows stagnant, with Chance running into dead ends, but it's Summer and Daniel who accidentally stumble onto a new lead while analyzing old ranch security archives, footage showing a suspicious vehicle circling the property in the days leading up to Nikki's disappearance. And while the license plate appears stolen, the car's pattern of movement suggests the driver was scouting, timing Nikki's routines, monitoring the security schedule, meaning the abduction was not spontaneous but part of a carefully plotted operation. But as the Newmans dig deeper, they uncover a truth even more chilling. The person behind Nikki's abduction has been manipulating events for months, planting seeds, creating distractions, orchestrating crises that kept the Newmans busy, distracted, fractured, and vulnerable. And when Adam compiles evidence of these orchestrated distractions, a terrifying theory emerges. This enemy didn't just want Nikki. They wanted the Newman family divided, weakened, emotionally compromised so that when Nikki was taken, they would be too unstable to respond effectively, too fractured to unite, too broken to fight back properly. And just when it seems the situation can't get worse, a second video arrives, this one clearer, sharper, more deliberate, showing Nikki on the floor, shaking uncontrollably, clearly dehydrated, terrified, whispering Victor's name as she tries to reach the door, only for the camera to shift and reveal a hand, gloved, steady, unhurried, placing another bottle of alcohol beside her before stepping away. And that single moment enrages Victor so deeply that he smashes the screen with his bare hand, shouting that he will burn the world to the ground to get Nikki back. But the true breaking point comes when the tormentor sends a message addressed not to Victor, but to Claire, a handwritten note telling her, "You know the rules. Those who were created in darkness must return to it. and that message sends Claire into a panic attack, triggering flashbacks of her traumatic past, of Jordan's manipulation, of the isolation and conditioning she endured for years, and she becomes convinced that this tormentor is someone connected to her lost childhood, someone who either worked with Jordan or learned from her, someone who believes the same twisted philosophy of breaking people to reshape them, as Claire shares her fear with. The Newmans, the family is forced to confront a horrifying possibility, that Nikki's abductor may be someone tied to the cultic environment Claire grew up in, someone lurking in the shadows of her past, someone who sees Nikki's suffering as some kind of symbolic punishment or ritual. And while this theory terrifies everyone, it becomes the first real direction they've had, but following this path only reveals darker truths, missing persons from surrounding states with similar patterns of psychological torture, disappearances with no resolution, cases dismissed as runaways but matching Nikki's circumstances far too closely, suggesting the tormentor is experienced, mobile, and disturbingly skilled at leaving no trace. And as the Newmans dive deeper into this horrifying network of psychological predators, they begin to realize that Nikki's disappearance may be part of a larger plan, one that goes far beyond revenge, far beyond personal vendettas, perhaps tied to an underground group obsessed with testing emotional limits, breaking spirits, and pushing victims to psychological collapse. The more they learn, the more dangerous the situation becomes, because Victor is now navigating a world where money and corporate power mean nothing, where the only currency is violence, secrecy, and fear, and the deeper he goes, the closer he gets to unleashing something monstrous inside him, something he has kept buried for decades. Meanwhile, Nikki, alone, terrified, and fighting her own battle in the darkness, begins to lose track of time, unsure whether hours or days have passed, her body weak, her mind drifting between hope and despair, and though she tries desperately to stay strong, to remember her family, to believe Victor will find her, the tormentor's constant psychological attacks begin to push her toward the edge. But the strength inside Nikki Newman, the survivor, the fighter, the woman who has battled addiction, trauma, betrayal, and loss, refuses to break completely, and in her darkest moments she begins looking for patterns, listening for sounds, memorizing every detail in her small prison, determined to stay alive long enough for the Newmans to find her. And while Nikki clings to hope, the Newman family prepares for the final stage of their desperate mission, because the tormentor has made one fatal mistake, sending too many messages, leaving too many clues, underestimating the Newman resilience. And as Adam and Victor piece together the last puzzle, they discover the location of Nikki's prison, a remote property connected to a shell company tied to a figure from Claire's past. And the horrifying final showdown begins, one that will determine whether Nikki survives, whether the Newmans rise or fall, and whether the enemy behind this nightmare is captured or escapes into the shadows to strike again. But one thing is certain, the Newmans will not stop until Nikki is home, and the person who tore their world apart pays the ultimate price.